Greetings, citizens, and thanks for tuning in to Nindie Nation. I'm Jeff, and today, while we wait for the eShop to wake up in 2024, we're going to check out some exciting games coming to the Switch later this year. Looking at indie games either already on PC or in early access, we've done this in previous years and found games like Hades, Cult of the Lamb, and Cyber Shadow. And I'm already confident that a couple of these games are gonna keep your Joy-Cons synced. So click that like button and subscribe to keep up to date with the best new Nintendo Switch indie games. And if you find something new in today's video, or are excited about something else we should put on our radar, let us know down in the comments or come join the discussion on Discord. And let's get this show on the road. These are 5 indie games coming to the Switch in 2024 that we've already played. After a promising first outing in 2016's Slaying Back from Hell, followed by the outstanding Valaris in 2019, developer Steel Mantis is back with Valaris, Mech, Atherion, and it just might be his best game yet. Even if you haven't played those two tough-as-nails action platformers, you're probably familiar with their incredible pixel art that blends gory, sci-fi, gothic visuals with a tone that is metal as hell. Apparently, the brutal boss fight at the end of Valaris wasn't the end of Atherion's story, because we pick right back up right where that game left off at the start of Mech Atherion. But instead of more run-and-gun action with a bit of Metroid influence, this time we're thrust into the pilot seat of a badass mech as we wipe out everything that moves in a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up. The visuals are exactly what you'd expect in this sequel, with even more vivid environments, insane enemies, and grotesque bosses to take out. And while the challenge is definitely still there, I'd say it's been toned down just a bit to make the non-stop adrenaline rushes a bit more manageable. Though I should mention I have yet to try the game on its hardest difficulty. In the 5 or so hours I spent with Valaris Mech Atherion since its PC release in November, I found a lot to like and have continued to go back to work on finding alternate paths within levels and further upgrade my favorite weapons. Most levels are only a few minutes long, but almost always surprise with some kind of crazy change in perspective or scenery that's all the more exciting thanks to the heavy metal soundtrack and consistently rewarding boss fights. As you lay waste to hordes of demonic alien bug things, you'll get frequent opportunities to land and upgrade or change your gear, which I found to be crucial in the later levels as you balance your loadout for various enemies that range from hordes of little mosquitoes, to worms that burrow in the ground, to pilots flying their own mechs. And since they all have their own set of weaknesses, those frequent checkpoints make retrying tougher encounters much more manageable since you can always try a different loadout. Both games previously released by Steel Mantis made their way to the Switch, and the developer has already told me that the port is currently underway. So if you like what you see here, set aside some of those digital dollars because Valaris Mech Atherion is a high-octane thrill ride that you won't want to miss. If there was one trend we saw in gaming last year, it was no doubt the endless wave of Vampire Survivors clones. It makes sense, as the simple, non-stop dopamine rush that game delivers was a breakout success. And while I did find a couple of games that came pretty close, most entries resulted in little more than
"It's like Vampire Survivors, but this time,"
and fill in the blank with some kind of minor tweak. That all changed last summer, though, when I got my hands on the early access build of Rogue Gena, and thanks to my Steam year in review, I now know that the 70+ hours I spent with this game made it my most played game on the Steam Deck, by quite a wide margin. In addition to the classes, enemy types, huge variety of weapons, and infectious mix of in-run upgrades and long-term progression, the thing Rogue Gena does better than any other is actually make a game out of the formula. Yes, you can load up your build of choice and get dropped into a 30-minute endless horde just like in Vampire Survivors, and there are plenty of challenges and rewards for doing so, but that's only a very small portion of what Rogue Gena has to offer. The story mode, as it were, actually builds out a grid-like map that divvies the gameplay up into bite-sized levels that range from about 90 seconds to over 10 minutes at a time. These levels could require you to win without moving, earn a certain amount of gold, use only specific weapons, defeat a set number of enemies, defeat a boss, or any number of different challenges that may not exactly revolutionize the core gameplay, but they give it some context that keeps the gameplay interesting as you move from level to level. In between levels, when you're on the map screen, you can select a couple different paths to take, with each world starting and ending in the same place, but giving you the choice about how you reach the final stage. You'll visit shops, meet with townsfolk, stop at a camp to rest up for the next battle, and even face occasional scenarios where you're asked to choose between outcomes like resting to replenish your health, cook up buffs at a campfire, or venture to a nearby town that's under attack. You'll face a big battle at the end of each world, and then based on the difficulty rank, of which there are currently 7, sometimes that's the end of the run, and sometimes it's just the first of several worlds before you can claim victory. Of course, the rest of the game is what you're used to by now, with numerous classes to pick from and a robust catalog of weapons and upgrades. But even with most of the gameplay being familiar, some classes do give you the option to play with twin-stick controls rather than just moving around with an auto-attack, and that's nice. I can't wait for Rogue Gena to land on the Switch, but with it still in early access on PC and the developer saying they'll start the port after launching 1.0, we're probably looking at later on in the year. I'm confident it's worth the wait though, and to leave you with one final thought about the game, mark my words, citizens, Rogue Gena is the first game to successfully out Vampire Survivors. One of my favorite parts of covering indies is when we beg Nintendo to revive a dead franchise for years, and then a small, scrappy team of developers end up delivering exactly what we've been asking for, usually for a fraction of the price. Well, that's exactly what we've got here with Whisker Squadron Survivor, and if you can't tell, yeah, it's Star Fox. Well, sort of. Let me back up. Flip-Fly is a Wisconsin-based team who made a name for themselves back in 2013 with the release of Race the Sun. It's a low-poly, on-rails flight game where you dodge obstacles and stay in the light, racing towards the sun before it sets. This game is sick, but you'll unfortunately have to grab it on a different platform because I only just realized that it never came to the Switch when I was sitting down to write this video. That's super weird, but go check it out on your phone because it plays great and it's still a ton of fun. After Race the Sun and then Absolute Drift a few years later, which did make its way to the Switch, the team had the idea to build a series loosely based around Star Fox. Whisker Squadron follows a group of wisecracking woodland creature pilots in the far-flung future. But to fund development for the larger vision, they began with a Kickstarter for Whisker Squadron Survivor. And this game is the bee's knees. It's a neon synthwave on-rails shooter that plays just like a modernized version of Star Fox should, but with one big catch. It's built around roguelite runs through various worlds that are meant to last up to 30 minutes at a time, if you can make it to the end. Pick your pilot, grab your favorite weapons, select a few perks or debuffs to earn more currency, and set out to shoot down as many enemies as possible. Along the way, you'll cross mini-bosses, a couple of alternate paths, and then every couple of minutes or so, the energy you collect from downed ships will fill up your experience gauge and you'll pick from a randomized list of upgrades. At this point, you can probably see where we're going here, right? The variety of weaponry and abilities is robust and just as you'd expect, and with multiple pilots, ships, and levels to explore, there's a surprising amount of content for a game that's only been in early access for a few months. And what is there is so fast and so smooth, I can't even begin to tell you how good it sounds too. There's a lot to look forward to in Whisker Squadron Survivor, but first it needs to get content complete and closer to version 1.0. So let's keep our fingers crossed that we hear about it coming to the Switch towards the end of 2024. In 2021, I fell in love with Curse of the Dead Gods and constantly recommended it as a great next step if you picked up Hades and wanted more similar gameplay. It's darker, more methodical, and much tougher, but it was still in our top 3 of 2021, so I've been waiting on pins and needles to see what Pastech Games was cooking up next. Thankfully, in late spring 2023, we got our answer when Raven's Watch released to early access. And let me tell you, They took everything they did right in Curse of the Dead Gods and built it into a game that mixes top-down Diablo-style RPG action with an extraction gameplay loop and painted it in the style of nightmare-inducing folktales. And I can't get enough of it. You and up to 3 other players select from characters like Geppetto, the Snow Queen, Little Red Riding Hood, and my personal favorite, the Pied Piper, and then you're dropped into a nightmare that must be cleansed of evil. The loop centers around a 4-day cycle that lasts around 20 minutes or so, where you explore an open top-down world, fighting enemies, leveling up, seeking out upgrades, and generally clearing out the place while building up your character before the 4th day dawns. Because when it does, you face off against a huge boss that will definitely put your dodge roll skills to the test, and it's one of the most addicting games I've played in a long time. I previously praised Curse of the Dead Gods for how much the game respects a player's time. You can tackle towers that take 10 to 15 minutes or so, or go for the whole hour-long run, and each attempt rewards you with an appropriate amount of loot so that you always feel like you're progressing regardless of how much time you're willing to commit. And Raven's Watch is the exact same. Recent updates have included the ability to alter the day-night cycle, and they continue to hone the difficulty and pacing, but the updates that include new characters have also been really exciting to see. For example, Beowulf plays as a brute knight during the day, with slower attacks combining a sword and shield, but when the night cycle arrives, you turn into a werewolf who is much faster and plays a bit like a glass cannon, but has the ability to heal with every bit of damage dealt. The Pied Piper, on the other hand, doesn't actually engage in much battle, but rather wanders around the level playing different tunes on his flute, which send rats after nearby enemies, weakening or stunning them before you head in to deal the final blow. This deep level of gameplay variety applies to all of the characters, and each has their own skill tree and customization options that you'll want to change as you adjust the challenge of each run. Thankfully, we don't have to guess with this one, as Past Tech has officially announced the game for the Switch, and we know it's coming in 2024. If you have a PC or Steam Deck, I highly recommend checking it out now, as the game already has tons of content. But if you choose to wait patiently for the Switch port, know that I'll be waiting to jump into some multiplayer demon-slaying action just as soon as we can all get our hands on Raven's Watch. Now, for most of the games that we discussed today, we haven't played the final version of most of these games, and a lot can change between this video's publishing and when we see all of these games on Nintendo's handheld console. But, y'all, I saved the best for last. Releasing right at the tail end of 2023 on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, Cookie Cutter is by far my favorite Metroidvania of 2023, and among my favorites of this console generation. Its stunning hand-drawn artwork and super snappy controls might just be a bit too much for the Switch, so we'll have to keep our eyes peeled for a port, but given Rogue's history of porting their games to Nintendo's hybrid handheld, a later release still seems likely. From the jump, the first thing you'll notice about Cookie Cutter is just how hard it works to earn that M rating. You play as Cherry, an android sent to toil away in a mine underground who was given sentience by her creator, who was then brutally murdered right in front of Cherry as punishment for trying to help both humans and androids escape the underground mining prison. So Cherry is pissed. Like, really pissed, and she's more than willing to let anyone know. With F-bombs flying every which way, and every enemy in the game having their own custom, brutally gory execution move, this is not a game for kids. But it gets its ideas and general design from a game that is quite a bit similar. If I had to pick one game to say Cookie Cutter is like, it is definitely Guacamelee, as the game is probably 60% fast-paced, combo-driven melee combat where you're balancing weak attacks with abilities and special attacks, and 40% exploration that is often bolstered by an ever-increasing locomotion skill set that combines dashing, double jumps, sliding, dive bombing, and all of the other moves that you're used to in games like this. Around the third night I was playing Cookie Cutter, I reached a boss fight that was a real nail-biter. It came all the way down to trading final blows with the boss, and when the screen flashed, I wasn't exactly sure who won. Unfortunately, I didn't make it out alive, and while at first I was disappointed and frustrated, I soon realized there was a huge swath of the area I had yet to fully explore. I did some backtracking, grinded out some currency through battling minions scattered about the world, and even found a couple of secrets tucked away that all helped me power up and give that boss a right whoopin' on my second attempt. It was at that point when I realized Cookie Cutter is much more open-ended than I was first giving it credit for, and the game encourages exploration of this open-ended world more than most do in the genre. I was already hooked on the addictive combat, hilarious yet heartfelt character interactions, surprisingly interesting story with tons of lore to find scattered about, and of course the brilliantly executed visuals, but it was that realization that the game was so much bigger and ripe for exploring than I initially thought that really sealed the deal for me. Citizens, put this one on every wishlist you've got, and if for some reason it doesn't come to the Switch, make sure to play it on a different platform. I'm pretty confident we will see this one receive an admittedly lower resolution port, but as long as the frame rate allows it to retain its snappiness, I think it'll be fine. Either way though, Cookie Cutter is an absolutely fantastic game, and one that all fans of Nindie Nation should not let pass you by. So what's the first game going on your wish list? Did we miss anything? Sound off down in the comments below and come join us on Discord to keep the Nindie conversation going. Be sure to click like and subscribe because starting next week, we'll be back on the regular schedule bringing you the best new Nintendo Switch indie games starting with episode 201 on January 10th. Until then, citizens, I'm Jeff. This has been another Nindie Nation video, and remember, no matter what type of game you're looking for, Nindie Nation will be right here to help you find just the thing to keep your Joy-Cons synced.